There are moments in life that divide everything into a before and an after. Moments where you realize you'll never be the same person again. And mine happened in a sweaty locker room, smelling of damp earth and diesel when my best friend didn't look away. I never thought I'd tell this story. I spent years burying it deep in my mind, pretending it meant nothing. But today, I need to talk about it. Because maybe you felt this kind of thing too. That moment where everything changes, but nothing has truly changed yet. Let's take our time, no rush. This story deserves to be told right. My name doesn't matter much, but his name does. Jake. We grew up together in a small rural town, the kind where everyone knows everyone's business. Our parents had neighboring farms. We learned to ride horses together, to fix fences, to work under the sun until our backs ached. It was that brotherly friendship, you know? The kind you think nothing in the world can destroy. Jake was always bigger than me. Broad shoulders, calloused hands, the calm demeanor of someone who never needed to prove anything to anyone. I was thinner, quieter. I was always the guy who observed while others made noise. And Jake was always my perfect opposite. He spoke. I listened. He laughed loudly. I smiled subtly. We completed each other in that natural way that only happens when you've known someone forever. But there was one thing I never told him. Something that started small, like a seed, and slowly grew until it filled every empty space inside me. I looked at him differently. I don't know exactly when it started. Maybe it was always there, hidden beneath our friendship, beneath the masculine codes nobody has to teach you. They just absorb them. You don't stare. You don't get too close. You don't let anyone notice that the hug after winning the rodeo lasted 2 seconds longer than necessary. I broke those rules in my head every night, and hated myself for it every morning. It was a Saturday in March. We had spent the whole day fixing the roof of my dad's barn. Hard work, scorching sun, that good kind of tiredness that makes you feel like you at least did something useful. Jake took off his shirt around 2 in the afternoon, and I pretended not to notice. Pretended I didn't see the sweat running down his back. Pretended my heart didn't race when he ran his hand through his hair and smiled at me. Have you ever pretended so much that you almost believed your own lie? When the sun began to set, we headed to the shower house my dad built near the barn. It was rustic. Wooden walls, old fixtures, everything smelling of dust and hard work. We always cleaned up there after working the land. It was routine. It was normal. But that day, something was different. I went in first, threw my dirty shirt in a corner, and turned on the shower. The cold water hit my back, and I closed my eyes, trying to clear my head. Trying not to think about him being right there next to me. Trying to be just a friend, just a brother by choice. Then I heard the door creak. Jake came in, tossed his boot to the floor with that heavy sound boots make, and started to change too. We had always done this. 1,000 times. There was nothing to it. But this time, when I glanced at him instinctively, because you look without thinking when someone enters your space, our eyes met, and he didn't look away. It wasn't a quick glance. It wasn't that fleeting recognition you give when you cross paths with someone you know. It was a gaze that lingered. 1 second, 2, 3. Long enough for me to feel every muscle in my body tense up. Long enough to realize that something had changed between us. I was the first to look away. Of course I was. Fear made my neck turn, my eyes darting anywhere but him. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it even over the sound of the shower. Why didn't he look away? That question hammered in my head for the rest of the shower. I finished quickly, dried myself even faster, and got out of there as if I were running from something. Jake didn't say anything. Neither did I. We got dressed in silence. I drove him home afterward, because that's what we always did. Saturday nights were for beers on his porch, guitar, conversations about nothing and everything. But that night, the silence inside the truck was deafening. When I pulled up to his house, Jake sat there longer than usual, hand on the door handle, looking straight ahead. I felt him glance at me from the corner of his eye. "You're acting strange," he said, his voice low, a little hoarse from the day's fatigue. "No, I'm not." Yes, you are. I didn't answer. I didn't know what to say, because if I opened my mouth, maybe everything would spill out. Maybe I'd tell him that yes, I was strange, that I had been strange for months, that every time he laughed, I felt a pang in my chest, that every time he accidentally touched me, I wished it would last longer, that look in the locker room had shattered any illusion I still had that I could hide it. Jake opened the door and got out. "See you tomorrow," he said, but it sounded like a question. I just nodded and left before I did anything stupid. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every second of that moment, the water falling, the steam rising, his eyes on mine. Why didn't he look away? Would you be willing to explore that with me? To understand what goes through someone's mind when everything you feel has to stay hidden? Because here's the truth, I hadn't had the courage to admit yet. This wasn't new. What I felt for Jake hadn't started in that locker room. It began years earlier. It started that summer when we were 15 and camped alone by the river. Jake slept with his head on my shoulder, and I stayed awake all night, afraid to move and wake him. It started that winter when he hugged me too tight after my dog died, and I felt something in my chest that wasn't just friendship. It started in every small moment I tried to ignore, bury, pretend didn't exist. The locker room just forced everything to the surface, and now I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't look at him and not feel. I couldn't be near him and not want more. I couldn't keep living that lie where I was just the best friend, the brother, the guy who would never feel anything beyond friendship. But there was something even worse than admitting what I felt. It was imagining what would happen if he found out. We lived in a small town. One of those places where people have gone to the same church for 50 years and think they know everything about everyone. One of those places where being different isn't an option. It's a death sentence. I had seen how they treated Marcus when the rumors about him started circulating. How people stopped greeting him. How his father stopped looking him in the eye. Marcus left town 6 months later and never came back. I couldn't be the next Marcus. And Jake? Jake was the most respected guy our age. Everyone liked him. Everyone trusted him. If I told him, if he knew, I would lose everything. Our friendship, his trust, the place I had in his life. I would lose him. So I decided to do what I had done until then. Bury everything deeper, ignore it, pretend that moment in the locker room hadn't happened, move on as if nothing had changed, but something had changed. When I saw Jake on Sunday at church, he was different. He didn't look at me the entire service. When we left, he just waved from a distance and drove off with his family. No, let's grab coffee or come over later. None of our usual routine. Monday, he didn't answer my texts. Tuesday, he said he was busy helping his dad. Wednesday, I understood he was avoiding me. And the worst part? I was avoiding him too. Because how do you look into the eyes of someone you love when that someone can never know it? How do you act normal when everything inside you is screaming to be seen, to be accepted, to be loved back? You can't. You simply can't. It was the longest week of my life, each day dragging as if it had 100 hours. Every night I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering what was going through his head. Did he notice? Was it too obvious? Is he disgusted? Is our friendship over and I don't even know it yet? The questions wouldn't stop. And then Saturday came again. Exactly 1 week after that locker room moment. My dad asked me to take some tools to Jake's dad. Quick trip, drop off and come back. But when I got there, he was the one who answered the door. We stood there, looking at each other, not knowing what to say. "Hi," he said. "Hi." The silence was painful. "Is your dad home?" I asked, just to have something to say. "He went to town. Won't be back until tonight." "Oh, okay. I just came to drop this off." I held out the toolbox, wanting to get out of there as fast as possible. But Jake didn't take it. He kept looking at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. "We need to talk," he said. And my world stopped spinning. Because those 4 words can mean everything or nothing. They could mean he knows and is angry. Or that he knows and wants to support me. Or that he knows nothing and just felt something was off between us. But one thing I knew. What happened in that conversation would define the rest of my life. What I didn't know yet was that Jake had also spent that entire week without sleep. That he was also scared. That look in the locker room wasn't just a coincidence or curiosity. It was something else. Something he had been struggling to understand for much longer than I imagined. 3 days. 3 entire days of deafening silence. 72 hours where every minute seemed to drag, as if time itself had conspired against me. I replayed that moment 1,000 times in my head. The taste of his lips, the ragged breath, the way his fingers trembled against my face. And each time I closed my eyes, it was as if it were happening again. Only this time, instead of feeling that explosion of what? Happiness? Terror? Desire? I felt only the cold emptiness of the silence that followed. The farm, which had always been our refuge, had transformed into a kind of emotional minefield. I started mapping his schedule as if my survival depended on it. If he went to feed the horses at 7 in the morning, I went at 6:30. If he usually fixed the fences on the east pasture after lunch, I found 1,000 reasons to work on the west side. It was exhausting. It was pathetic. But I couldn't stop. My father noticed. Of course he noticed. "Is everything okay between you and Jake?" he asked one morning over coffee before the sun came up. The casual tone didn't fool me. He'd been thinking about this for a while. "No, Dad. We're just busy. Different tasks." He looked at me over his coffee cup with that gaze fathers develop over the years, the one that sees through all your lies since you were 5 and swore you didn't leave the gate open. "That boy's been on our farm since you two could walk. Never seen you two too busy for each other." He took a long sip. "Whatever happened, don't let it ruin a lifelong friendship." If only it were that simple. The problem was, I didn't know what the hell had happened. He kissed me. Or did I kiss him? Or was it simultaneous? One of those moments where no one knows who started it because it just happened? And what did that mean? For him? For me? For us? I had spent 17 years building an identity in this small town. The farmer's son, average at sports, the guy who showed up to church on Sundays, Jake's best friend. And now I didn't know who I was anymore. Or worse, I knew exactly who I was, and the thought terrified me. Because I couldn't stop thinking about him. The way his hair was messed up by the wind, the way his eyes darkened a second before the kiss, the sound of his breath, quick and shallow, as if he'd run a marathon when in fact we'd barely moved. And this wasn't new. Not at all. I had just become extraordinarily good at pretending it was nothing. At pushing those thoughts into a dark corner of my mind where I didn't have to look at them head on. But now it was as if a dam had burst. All those moments I had categorized as friendship began to rearrange themselves in my memory with brutal clarity. The times my stomach would clench when he smiled. The way I became hyper-aware of his proximity. How I always knew exactly where he was in any room. The strange pang of jealousy when he chatted up some girl at school. God, I was so stupid, or in denial, or both. The morning of the 3rd day started like the others, me obsessively checking where Jake was before leaving my room. I breathed a sigh of relief when I saw through the window that he was already in the horse stables. Great. I could do my chores in the house and... "Are you going to stand there staring out the window, or are you going to help your old man load feed?" My dad's voice made me jump. Shit. How long had he been there? I went downstairs quickly, trying to act normal. Whatever normal meant now. We loaded bags of feed into the big barn, that repetitive physical work that I usually liked because it switched off my brain. But today my brain wouldn't switch off for anything. I was stacking the last bag when I heard the barn door creak. My whole body froze. I didn't need to look to know who it was. I apparently had this built-in radar for his presence. "Jake, good. You can help organize the..." my dad began, but I was already turning, already looking for an escape. Any escape. Our eyes met. It was like, you know when you accidentally touch an electric fence? That shock that runs through your whole body in less than a second? It was exactly like that. He was standing at the barn entrance, the morning sun behind him creating a kind of backlight that made it impossible to fully read his expression. But I saw his eyes, saw the way they widened a little, saw the exact moment he registered my presence. For 3 eternal seconds, neither of us moved. The entire barn seemed to be holding its breath. I could hear my own heart pounding in my ears, so loud I was sure he could hear it too. There was so much I wanted to say, needed to say. I'm sorry. Explain what happened. Why aren't you talking to me? Are you okay? I can't stop thinking about that kiss. But what came out of my mouth was, I need to go get the thing. The thing. Great. Very articulate. My brain had officially given up on functioning. I turned so fast I almost tripped over a feed bag and left the barn as if fleeing a fire. Behind me, I heard my dad say something to Jake, but the blood was pounding so hard in my ears that I couldn't make out the words. I spent the rest of the morning hidden in the farthest pasture on the farm, mending a fence that didn't even need mending. My hands trembled so much that I hammered my own thumb twice. But the physical pain was almost welcome. At least it was something concrete, something I could understand and treat. Not like this. This mess that was happening inside my chest. What was happening with him? He seemed so scared? Or maybe regretful. And what if he was regretful? What if that had been a gigantic mistake for him, and now he just wanted to pretend it never happened? The idea made me physically nauseous. I had to sit on the ground, put my head between my knees, and take several deep breaths so I wouldn't actually throw up. Worse than that, though, was the alternative possibility. What if he wasn't regretful? What if he was just as confused and terrified as I was? What if we were doing this pathetic dance of avoiding each other, together? Each of us just as terrified as the other to speak first. I didn't know which option was worse. The days began to settle into a strange, painful routine. I'd catch glimpses of Jake, a silhouette in the distance, the nape of his neck disappearing as he rounded a corner, a door closing just as I arrived. It was like trying to cup water in my hands. He was there, but not really there. But I noticed things. Small things. The way he'd stop what he was doing when I entered a room, even if only for half a second before continuing. How he'd also started mapping my schedule, because we never ran into each other anymore. And that required planning from both sides. Once I caught him looking at me from across the pasture, and when our eyes met, he didn't immediately look away. We just stood there, 50 yards apart, just staring, until his dad called, and the moment shattered. He was different too. I could see it even from a distance. Shoulders more tense, less of that easy smile when he talked to other people. Once I saw him pushing food around his plate at the Friday night dinners our families had together. A tradition of years, and he barely touched his meal. That wasn't normal. Jake was always the type to eat until his plate gleamed. "Are you sick, son?" his mother asked, worried. "Just not hungry, Mom." He gave that smile that didn't reach his eyes. I knew that smile. It was the same one I'd been wearing all week. We were doing this to each other. This pain, this confusion, this impossible distance between two best friends. It was mutual. And somehow, that was worse. Because it meant we were choosing this. Choosing the silence and the distance instead of simply talking. But how? How was I supposed to start that conversation? "Hey, Jake, about that kiss that completely changed the way I see you, me, and everything in my life." No, impossible. And then came Monday. The Monday that changed everything again. My dad had decided it was time to fix the roof of the old barn. That huge job we'd been putting off for ages. And because the universe has a cruel sense of humor, he decided Jake and I should do it together. "You two have always been the best team. You'll finish it in half the time." I wanted to argue, wanted to invent any excuse. But Jake was there, and our parents were there, and refusing would be admitting something was wrong. So I just nodded, grabbed the tools, and started climbing the ladder. The roof was big, but not big enough. Every move had to be coordinated. "Hand me that hammer. Hold this board. Watch out for that hole." Short, functional sentences, stripped of anything personal. But even so, it was the closest we'd been in days, and my body was painfully aware of it. Every time we had to move in the cramped space of the roof, it was like my entire skin woke up. His arm brushed mine when we were lifting a beam. For half a second, I felt his warmth through 2 layers of clothes, and my entire brain short-circuited. He felt it too. I know he did because he hesitated, just a fraction of a second, before continuing as if nothing had happened. "Hold this end," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "I'll nail it from the other side." We worked in the suffocating midday heat, the sun beating down on our backs, sweat trickling, muscles aching. It was the kind of physical labor we usually did playfully, competing to see who nailed faster, making silly jokes. But today the silence was so thick it felt solid. Until I slipped. It wasn't serious. My foot lost its grip on a loose board and I swayed forward. But Jake reacted instinctively, dropping his hammer and grabbing my arm with both hands, pulling me back hard. We tumbled onto the roof, Jake half beneath me, panting from the fright. For a moment we stayed exactly like that. My chest against his, so close I could feel his heart beating. Or maybe it was mine. Impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. His fingers were still on my arm, squeezing. He hadn't let go. I lifted my head and met his eyes. We were inches apart. I could count the freckles on his nose, see the golden flecks in his brown irises, observe the way his lips parted slightly, as if he was about to say something but forgot how words worked. The whole world narrowed down to this point, to this moment, to this impossible and necessary and terrifying proximity. This time, there was no kiss. But there was something that was somehow more intimate. There was recognition. There was a second where neither of us pretended that this was normal, or friendship, or anything else safe we could hide behind. "You," Jake started, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Are you okay?" I couldn't speak. I could only nod, very slowly, without breaking eye contact. His fingers tightened on my arm once more. It wasn't a grip of fright. It was something different, something deliberate. Before he finally let go, the cold air where his touch had been felt wrong, incomplete. We pulled away, slowly, reorganizing ourselves on the roof with exaggerated caution. But something had changed. The invisible wall we had built had cracked a little, not broken, not yet, but cracked enough to let in some light. Jake cleared his throat. He tried again. "We need to be more careful." "Yeah, careful." The words came out automatically, but we both knew we weren't just talking about the roof. We finished the work in silence, but it was different now. Less suffocating, more charged, like the air before a storm, when you know something big is coming but you can't yet see the clouds. When we climbed down from the roof, our hands touched on the ladder, just a brush of fingers, a second. But Jake didn't pull his hand away immediately, and neither did I. I went home that night feeling like I was living in two worlds simultaneously. In the first world, I had dinner with my parents, laughed at my dad's jokes, helped wash the dishes, did my homework. Normal life, safe life, life that made sense. In the second world, every nerve ending in my body was still on fire from his touch. My mind replayed those seconds on the roof in an endless loop, and my heart was racing towards something I couldn't name but was becoming impossible to ignore. I was lying in bed staring at the ceiling when my phone vibrated. A message. From him. 3 words that tied my stomach in knots. "We need to talk." I stared at those words for so long that the screen went dark. I lit it up again. Read it again. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. What did I answer? Yes? When? About what? As if I didn't know exactly what about. Finally I typed, "When?" The reply came almost immediately, as if he'd been holding his phone, waiting. "Tomorrow night, after dinner. Our spot?" Our spot. The old oak tree on the border between our properties, where we'd built a treehouse when we were 8, where we'd spent countless afternoons talking about everything and nothing, where we'd carved our initials into the trunk when we turned 10, swearing eternal friendship. Of course it would be there. Where else could it be? "Okay," I replied. 3 letters, 2 syllables. A commitment that felt much bigger than anything else I'd ever done in my life. I couldn't sleep that night. I tossed and turned in bed, rehearsing 1,000 different conversations in my head. In some, I was brave and articulate. In others, I stammered and fled. Mostly, Jake spoke first, and I finally found out what the hell was going on in his head. But they all ended in the same place, with a huge, terrifying question about who I was and what it meant for the rest of my life. The next day dragged on with torturous slowness. Each hour seemed to last days. I was physically present, doing chores, eating meals, answering questions, but mentally, I was already under that oak tree, waiting. Dinner was especially difficult. My mom made my favorite dish and I could barely eat. "Are you okay, honey?" she asked for the third time. "Just tired from working on the roof yesterday." Another lie on the growing pile of them. When it finally got dark enough to slip out without raising suspicion, I mumbled something about needing to grab a tool from the barn and left. My heart was pounding so loudly I thought it would explode. The walk to the oak tree usually took 5 minutes. I made it in 3. And then, I stopped at the edge of the clearing, because he was already there. Jake was leaning against the tree trunk, illuminated by the rising crescent moon. He was looking up at the branches where our treehouse once stood, before a storm took it when we were 12. Hands in his pockets, shoulders tense, he heard me arrive and turned. And at that moment, in the silvery moonlight, I saw something in his face I hadn't seen in days. Complete, unmasked vulnerability. He began, and his voice cracked a little. "I don't know where to start. Makes 2 of us," I said, and somehow managed to take a step forward. And another, until I was close enough to see the details of his face. We stood there, 2 best friends on the brink of something enormous, neither of us knowing how to cross the chasm we'd created. But at least, finally, we were going to try. That night in the barn, Jake spoke slowly, choosing each word with care. I can't stop thinking about it. My heart was racing. Me neither. He shook his head, and in the moonlight I saw something in his eyes that made my stomach clench. Determination, fear, and something else. Something deeper that I didn't have a name for yet. He took a deep breath, released it slowly. "I wasn't prepared for what I'm about to tell you now. But if I don't say it, I think I'll explode." He paused. I waited, each second an eternity. "I didn't kiss you on impulse that night." He was looking straight into my eyes now, not wavering. "I kissed you because I've wanted to for years." The world stopped. Completely. Totally. Years. The word came out as a whisper. And at that moment, under the oak tree where we'd spent our entire childhood, Jake looked at me with an intensity I'd never seen before. And when he opened his mouth, the words that came out were not what I expected. Jake looked at me with that intensity that made me feel like he could see right through me. The faint light from the distant street lamp barely reached us, under the giant oak that marked the property line. The night air carried the smell of damp earth and freshly cut grass. Back there, the party continued. Muffled music, occasional laughter, the world going on as if nothing extraordinary was happening. But here, in that circle of shadows, everything was about to change. Jake took a deep breath, the way someone breathes before jumping off a cliff. "I need to tell you something," he began, and his voice trembled in a way I'd never heard before. "And I don't know how you're going to react, but I can't pretend anymore." My heart hammered. Every fiber of my being was on high alert. "Jake, Let me speak first," he interrupted, not sharply but with urgency, as if he stopped now, he'd never be able to start again. "Please." I nodded, unable to form words. He ran a hand through his hair, that nervous gesture I knew so well. "When you asked me why I didn't look away that night, I lied. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't because I was confused or distracted." He paused, finding my eyes in the dim light. "I didn't look away because I didn't want to." The world stopped. His words hung in the air between us, heavy and real and impossible to undo. "I didn't want to look away," he repeated, softer now. "Because I've spent the last 3 years looking away, pretending I didn't feel what I felt, pretending you were just my best friend and nothing more. And that night, when you looked at me like that, afraid I'd reject you." His voice broke. I realized I had the same fear. I couldn't breathe, literally forgot how. You're saying that. That I like you, Jake finished, and this time his voice was firm, determined. Not as a friend, or at least, not just as a friend. I like you in a way that scares me, in a way I've tried to ignore, deny, suffocate. But it doesn't work. It never worked. Hot tears burned my eyes, not from sadness, from pure relief, as if I'd carried in crushing weight for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to breathe without it. Jake. I know this complicates everything, he continued quickly, as if he needed to get it all out before he lost his nerve. I know your family. That the whole town. That it's easier to pretend this doesn't exist. But I can't anymore. I can't keep seeing you afraid that I'll reject you when the truth is that He closed his eyes for a second. The truth is, I always wanted to pull you closer, not push you away. My voice came out strangled, broken. I thought I was alone in this. His eyes snapped open. What? I thought... The words struggled to emerge. I thought I was the only one. That you would never. That I was seeing things that weren't there. Misinterpreting every moment, every glance, every time you got too close or took too long to pull away. Jake took a step towards me, then another. Until we were so close I could feel his warmth, see the tiny variations of color in his eyes even in the darkness. You weren't misinterpreting, he said softly. I was too close because I wanted to be. I took too long to pull away because pulling away from you always felt wrong. A half-hysterical, half-relieved laugh escaped me. 3 years. What? 3 years, I repeated. You said 3 years. For me. I guess it always was. Ever since I met you. But 3 years ago was when I stopped trying to pretend to myself. Jake ran a hand over his face. And when he lowered it, he was smiling. Not that easy, confident smile he showed everyone, but a shaky, vulnerable, real smile. We're so stupid, he said. Completely, I agreed, and suddenly we were laughing together. Not with unbridled joy, but that slightly nervous, slightly incredulous laugh that comes when something impossible suddenly becomes real. The laughter faded until it was just shared breaths in the narrow space between us. I'm so scared, I confessed in a whisper. Me too. My family will never accept it. The town. People will talk. They'll look at us differently. I know. Jake interrupted softly. I know all that. And I'm scared too. But do you know what I'm more afraid of? He touched my face, his hand warm against my skin. Of continuing to pretend. Of waking up 10 years from now and realizing I wasted the chance to be happy because I was too busy trying to make everyone else happy but myself. Tears streamed down my face, and I didn't even try to hide them. When you looked at me that night, Jake continued, his thumb gently wiping a tear. So afraid that I would reject you. That's when I realized I had spent 3 years with the same fear. Fear that if I said something, if I showed how I felt, I would lose you. And losing you. That always seemed worse than living with this secret. You won't lose me, I said, my voice finally firm. Certain. Not now. Not after this. So where do we go from here? It was the million-dollar question, because confessing secret feelings under an oak tree was one thing. Living it in the real world, at school, at home, in this town where everyone knows everyone and has an opinion about everything, was completely different. But looking at Jake, seeing in him the same fear and the same hope I felt, one thing became clear. I don't know, I admitted. I don't know how we're going to make this work. I don't know how we're going to deal with my family, with school, with everything. But I know I don't want to pretend anymore. Jake nodded slowly. Me neither. We can take it slow, I suggested. Figure things out as they come. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be big and public yet. It just needs to be real. Real, Jake repeated, as if testing the word. Then he smiled, that true smile I had just discovered. I like that. We stood there for a long moment, just looking at each other. Not like best friends who'd spent years hiding the truth, but like two people who finally had the courage to be honest. Jake reached out, and I took his hand. Our fingers intertwined naturally, perfectly, as if they were always meant to be like that. "Is this weird?" he asked. "No," I answered honestly. "Weird would be if it didn't feel so right." He chuckled softly and pulled me closer. For a moment, I thought he was going to kiss me. My heart raced at the possibility, but instead, he hugged me. A long, tight embrace that said everything words couldn't. I sank into him, letting myself feel his solidity, his warmth, his reality. For the first time in my life, I wasn't hiding. I wasn't pretending. I wasn't afraid he'd see too much. He already knew everything. And he was still here. When we finally pulled apart, the party noise reached us again. The music had changed to something slower. Voices called for us in the distance. Probably Anna looking to see where we'd gone. "We need to go back," Jake said, but didn't let go of my hand. "I know. And tomorrow, everything will be waiting. Your family, the expectations, the reality of trying to be this." He squeezed my hand. "In a place that doesn't make it easy. I know that too." Jake pulled me back, stopping before we stepped out from the protection of the oak tree's shadows. "But we face it together, right?" "Together," I promised. He smiled, and in that smile, I saw hope. Fear, yes. Uncertainty, definitely. But also hope. The fragile, precious possibility that maybe, just maybe, we could make this work. We had each other. But in a small town where everyone had an opinion on how you should live your life, that was just the beginning of the fight. The real battle, for acceptance, for understanding, for the right to exist as we were, was yet to come. And as we walked back towards the lights and voices, our hands separating out of necessity but not by choice, I knew that what awaited us wouldn't be easy. My family had expectations. The town had unwritten rules. And we had to figure out how to be true to ourselves in a world that preferred us to be something else. But for the first time, I wasn't facing it alone. And that made all the difference. The next morning arrived like a jolt of reality. I woke up in my room, in my old sheets that smelled like my mom's detergent, and for a second, just 1 second, I thought it had all been a dream. But then I tasted him still on my lips, the ghost of his touch still on my skin, and I knew it was real. Everything was real. And that made everything infinitely more complicated. I went down for breakfast, and there was my family, my dad reading the newspaper, my mom frying eggs, my younger brother complaining about homework. All absolutely normal. All exactly as it was yesterday. Except I wasn't the same anymore. I had completely transformed in 12 hours, and they had no idea. I sat at the table and grabbed a piece of toast. My mom looked at me strangely. "You're different today," she said, and my heart nearly stopped. "Am I?" "You're smiling. Usually you're scowling in the morning." She laughed and turned back to the eggs. Must have slept well. If she only knew. If she had the slightest idea why I was smiling. If she could see inside my head, where every thought, every memory, every sensation was of him. Jake. His name was a sacred word now. Something I held precious and secret. "Yes," I said. I slept very well. The lie came out too easily, and that scared me. My dad lowered his newspaper. "Are you going to help in the barn today? Jake said they need extra hands to fix that fence." Just hearing his name spoken aloud made my stomach churn. "Sure," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "No problem." "Good boy." My dad returned to his newspaper. "Jake's a good kid. Hardworking, responsible. The right kind of influence for you." I bit my tongue until I tasted blood. The irony wasn't lost on me. My dad saw Jake as the ideal. Hard-working, solid, everything a man should be. If he only knew that Jake was the reason I finally understood who I was. If he only knew that the boy he trusted had kissed me under the stars and changed everything. I finished breakfast in silence and went out to the Wilsons' barn. Jake was already there, fixing the fence with his dad. When he saw me, his eyes lit up for a fraction of a second, so fast no one else would notice. But I noticed. I always noticed everything about him now. "Morning," I said casually. "Hey," Jake replied, and there was a whole world in those 2 letters, a secret code, a hidden promise. Mr. Wilson nodded at me. "Good to have you here. We're going to need a lot of wood for this fence. Jake, show him where the planks are." We worked side by side for hours under the hot sun, hands getting raw and covered in splinters. It was torture, to be so close but unable to reach for him, to see his sweat and have to act like it meant nothing, to hear his laugh and keep my face blank. Around noon, Mr. Wilson went to the house for lunch. The moment he was out of sight, Jake turned to me. "I thought about you all night," he whispered. "Jake." I nervously looked around. Someone might hear us. There's no one here. But he still stepped back, and I saw the frustration in his eyes. The same frustration that was consuming me. To be so close, yet so far. "Is it always going to be like this?" I asked. "Hiding? Pretending?" Jake didn't answer immediately. He hammered another nail into the fence, the sound echoing in the silence between us. "I don't know," he finally said, and the honesty in his voice hurt more than a lie. Mr. Wilson returned with lemonade. We drank and talked about the weather, the crops, about nothing that truly mattered. And throughout the entire conversation, I felt this division growing inside me, the person I was pretending to be, and the person I truly was. 2 halves that couldn't coexist. Then Mr. Wilson said something that made my blood run cold. "Did you see that news story? About the Pride Parade in the city?" He spat the words out as if they tasted wrong. "It's disgusting. Don't these people have any sense of shame? What are we teaching our kids?" I froze, the lemonade glass suspended halfway to my mouth. "It's a sickness," Mr. Wilson continued, shaking his head. "That's what happens when parents don't raise their kids right. That's how you get these things." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I felt as if the entire world was crumbling around me, and all I could do was stand there, pretending to agree through my silence. That's what he thought of people like me, like Jake, like us. But then I felt something. A gaze. I looked up, and there he was, Jake, looking directly at me. And in that gaze, there was everything: anger, fear, solidarity, love. His eyes said, "I'm here. You're not alone. We'll get through this together." It was just a moment, maybe 3 seconds at most, but it was enough. Mr. Wilson continued speaking, oblivious to the silent communication between us. And I took a deep breath and survived that moment. Because Jake was there. Because I wasn't alone. But it was just the beginning. That night at dinner, my mom brought it up. "You know, honey," she said, passing the mashed potatoes, "my friend mentioned her daughter is moving back after college. You remember her from when you were kids?" "I remember," I said cautiously, sensing where this was going. "Well, she's turned into a beautiful young woman, getting her degree in education. You 2 are about the same age." Mom gave me that look, the one full of what she hoped for my future. "You should reach out. Maybe go grab coffee sometime." "Mom, I'm not saying you have to marry her tomorrow," she chuckled. "But you're 21. It's time to start thinking about the future, about settling down, giving me some grandchildren eventually." My dad grunted in agreement, his mouth full of meat. My younger brother made a face, and I sat there, feeling each word like a door closing, a possibility dying. They had my whole future planned out, and that future had no room for Jake. No room for the truth. Later that night, I was lying in my bed, staring at the ceiling, when I heard a sound at the window. Pebbles. My heart pounded. I ran to the window, and there he was, Jake, in the garden, signaling for me to come down. I crept down the stairs silently, slipped out the kitchen window, and ran to him in the darkness. "Are you insane?" I whispered. "What if someone sees?" "I had to see you." He grabbed my hand. "Let's go." We ran across the fields, feet soaking through the damp grass, until we reached the old barn on the property line. No one went there anymore. It belonged to us. Inside, Jake lit an old lantern, casting dancing shadows on the wooden walls. "Sorry about my dad today," he said right away. What he said, I could have lost it. I wanted to yell at him, tell him he's wrong about everything, but I know. I took his hand. I know. How are we going to do this? His voice was full of despair. How can we stay here, listening to these things, pretending to be something we're not? I don't know if we can. The words came out before I could stop them. But once spoken, they hung between us, heavy and true. Jake pulled me close, and suddenly we were kissing, desperate, hungry, as if we could somehow resolve everything through touch. His hands were in my hair, my hands were on his back, and for a moment, nothing else mattered. Not our parents, not the town, not the fear. Only this mattered. Us. When we finally broke apart, we were breathless. "We can't hide forever," I said. "I know, but we also can't just come out. Not here. You saw how your dad talked today. Imagine if he knew. He'd kill me." Jake's voice was flat, factual. "Or kick me out, or both." "So what do we do?" Jake walked to the barn window, staring out into the dark. The lantern light caught his face, and he looked exhausted, older than his years. "Maybe we need to leave," he said quietly. "Leave? This place, everything we know." He turned back to me. "There are bigger cities, you know, places where we could actually live, be who we really are." My heart was pounding. "You're serious about this?" "Maybe. I don't know." He ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. "But I can't do this anymore. I can't have you and pretend you're just a friend. I love you, and I'm tired of hiding." "Loving," he said, "loving. Jake." "Sorry. It's too soon to say that, I know, but..." He gave a humorless laugh. "But it's true. I love you. I think I always have, and keeping it inside is killing me." I crossed the distance between us and kissed him. Soft this time. Tender. "I love you too," I whispered against his lips. "And you're right. We can't hide forever." We spent hours planning, dreaming about what could be. Austin, maybe. Or somewhere on the coast. Places where we could hold hands in public without looking over our shoulders. Where we could just exist. They were beautiful dreams. But they were still just dreams. Around 2 in the morning, Jake started to leave. "I have to go before dawn. If my father wakes up and I'm not there." "I know. Go." But before he left, he turned and gave me one last kiss. "We'll figure this out," he promised. "Somehow." "Yes," I said, wanting to believe. Somehow. But when I got home, crawling back through the kitchen window, all I could think about was my mother's comment about Laura, about grandchildren, about the future they envisioned for me, a future that could never be. The next few days felt like sleepwalking. I went through the motions, working the land, sitting through family meals, saying nothing that mattered. But inside, I was breaking. Every hint about my future, every assumption about who I should be, every truth I swallowed, it was all crushing me. Jake and I met when we could. Stolen moments behind the barn. Quick glances during family lunches. Encrypted text messages we deleted immediately. It was exhausting. It was unsustainable. And then, 5 days after that night in the barn, the invitation arrived. Mom came into my room excited, waving an invitation. "Great news! The Wilsons are throwing a Sunday dinner. Both families. They have something important to tell us." My stomach dropped. "Announcement? They have no idea what it is. Maybe they're expanding the farm? Or maybe..." She gave a mysterious smile. "Maybe it has to do with Jake. You know he's 23 now. Time to settle down." "Oh no, 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 no." "Maybe he's getting engaged," my mother continued, excited by the gossip. "Although I don't know anyone he's dating. He's so discreet about these things." She had no idea how discreet. I tried to call Jake, but he didn't answer. I texted. Nothing. Dinner was in 2 days, and I had no idea what was about to happen. The night before dinner, Jake finally appeared at my window again. "Sorry," he said as soon as we got into the barn. "My father kept me busy. He's planning something." "The dinner?" "Yes." Jake looked sick. "He has an announcement. About me." My heart stopped. "What is it?" "I don't know exactly. He hasn't told me everything." Jake was pacing back and forth like a caged animal. "But it has to do with the farm, with my future. He keeps saying it's for my own good, that it will make a man out of me, and I'm terrified." "Jake, what if it's something that separates us?" he exploded. "What if he's planning to send me somewhere, or set me up with some friend's daughter, or... I don't know. But whatever it is, it's going to change everything." I held his shoulders, forcing him to look at me. "Then we deal with it. Together." "How?" "I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out." I pulled him close. "Whatever your father announces tomorrow, it doesn't change what we are, what we have." Jake rested his forehead against mine. "I'm so scared." "Me too." And it was true. I was terrified. Because whatever Mr. Wilson was going to announce, I knew it would force our hand. We'd have to choose stay and hide who we were forever, or leave and be free. And I didn't know which would be worse. That last night before dinner, Jake and I lay in the hay in the barn, fingers intertwined, staring at the ceiling beams. Neither of us said much. There wasn't much to say. We were on the brink of something, a precipice, a change, a moment that would define everything that came after. "No matter what happens tomorrow," Jake finally said in the dark, "I want you to know. These last few weeks were the best of my life. Don't talk like it's goodbye. It's not, I just want you to know." I kissed him then, slow and deep, memorizing his taste, his touch, because some part of me knew things would never be the same after tomorrow. Sunday dinner arrived with brutal clarity. Perfect blue sky. Perfect temperature. The kind of day that should be happy. My family arrived at the Wilsons' farm at 5 o'clock sharp. Mrs. Wilson had set the big dining table with the good china. Mr. Wilson was at the barbecue, flipping steaks. Jake was helping. But when our eyes met across the yard, I saw the tension in every line of his body. Something was wrong, or was about to be. We sat down for dinner, both families around the big table, passing dishes, making polite conversation. I could barely eat, just pushed the food around my plate, watching Mr. Wilson at the head of the table. He was pleased with himself, smiling that smile that didn't reach his eyes, waiting for the right moment. Finally, after dessert had been served, he tapped his knife against his glass. "Attention, everyone. I have an announcement." The table fell silent. My mother leaned forward, excited. My father took a sip of beer. Jake remained completely still beside me, his fingers white around the fork. "As you know," Mr. Wilson began, "Jake is 23 now, a grown man, and the time has come for him to take on more responsibility on the farm." Here it comes, I thought. Here comes everything. So, I decided. Mr. Wilson paused dramatically, savoring the moment. "I'm going to split the farm in two. The south half goes to Jake, immediately. It's his to run as he pleases." Exclamations around the table. My mother applauded. My father clapped Mr. Wilson on the shoulder, impressed. But Mr. Wilson wasn't finished. "There's just one condition." He looked directly at Jake. "You need to be married within the next 6 months. Settle down properly. Show that you can be responsible not just for a farm, but for a family." The world stopped. I could hear my own heart pounding. I could feel the sweat starting on my palms. I could see Jake beside me, frozen, his face a mask of shock. "Married?" Jake finally managed to say. "Yes, son. It's time." Mr. Wilson smiled. "In fact, I already have someone in mind. My friend Marcus's daughter is back from college. Beautiful girl, good family, perfect upbringing. I've already mentioned you to her, and she's interested in meeting." And there it was. The cage closing. The trap being set. I looked at Jake, and I saw everything on his face. Panic, anger, despair. His entire life being planned without his consent. His future being decided based on a lie. The table was waiting for his answer. Everyone smiling, excited, happy with this wonderful news. Jake opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. And in that moment, surrounded by both our families, at Sunday dinner under a perfect blue sky, we both realized the same thing. We would have to choose, now, tonight, stay and destroy who we were, or leave and destroy everything we knew. At Sunday dinner, surrounded by both our families, Jake's father stood up with news that would either destroy us or set us free. We had no idea which it would be. That Sunday dinner was supposed to be normal. Both families, the table full, everyone talking over each other. But the air felt heavy, electric, like something was about to snap. Jake sat beside me, rigid. His shoulders were locked, his hands gripping his knees under the table. The anxiety coming off him was almost visible. That's when Mr. Anderson stood. The chair scraping against the floor silenced everyone. All eyes on him. He cleared his throat, that same nervous gesture Jake had inherited. And I knew this was it. "I have an announcement," he said, his voice steady and proud. "I've arranged an incredible opportunity for Jake. A business partner opened a branch in Austin and needs someone reliable to run it. Great pay, benefits, real potential." My mother smiled politely. Jake's mother's eyes widened in surprise. His sisters exchanged glances. "It's a real opportunity," Mr. Anderson pressed, his eyes fixed on Jake. "A fresh start. Meet people. Build something solid. Maybe find a nice woman, start a family, good community there." The message was clear. Get away. Forget this friendship. Find a girl. Live the life we want for you. I felt Jake shaking next to me. "Dad," Jake started, but the words caught. "It's a big step," Mr. Anderson continued, staying on his feet, commandeering the dinner table like a business meeting. "But real men take risks. They push themselves beyond what's comfortable. That's how you build a real life." I watched Jake's face go white, his hands shaking. I could see him torn. Accept this escape, pretend to be grateful, leave everything behind and keep the lie alive. Or... He looked at me. For a moment that stretched forever, our eyes locked. I saw everything. The fear, the despair, but also something else. A decision being made. Something shifted in his expression. Jake pushed his chair back so hard it scraped against the floor. Everyone jumped. "Dad," he said, and his voice was different now. Steady, certain. "I need to tell you something. I need to tell all of you." Mr. Anderson frowned. "You can talk later, Jake. We were discussing your future." "No." The word came out with a force I had never heard in Jake's voice. "I can't wait any longer. I've waited too long already." My heart was racing. This was it. I reached for his hand, tried to give him something to hold on to, but he was standing now, shaking but resolved. "I'm not taking that job," Jake said, and his voice shook, but he kept going. "I'm not moving to Austin. I'm staying right here. And I'm not meeting any woman." The table went silent. Complete, total silence. "Jake," his mom whispered, reaching out, but he held up his hand. "Wait. Let me say this." He took a breath, and his hands were clenched, unclenched, searching for the courage to continue. "I've spent my entire life pretending, being who you wanted me to be. I studied what you wanted, dated girls you approved of, acted interested in marriage and kids and the future you wanted for me. But I can't do it anymore." "What are you talking about?" His father was confused now, his expression wavering between irritation and something that looked like fear. Jake's eyes found mine. When he spoke next, it felt like he was only talking to me, even though everyone at that table was listening. "I'm gay. Always have been. And I'm done pretending." The world stopped. I could hear his father's heavy breathing, the muffled sound of someone swallowing hard, the squeak of a chair as Jake's mother shifted. "I spent years hating myself for it," Jake said, tears now running down his face, but he didn't stop. Praying it would change, telling myself it was just a phase, believing if I tried hard enough, I could be normal. But it doesn't work like that. This isn't a choice. It's not something I can turn off because it makes you uncomfortable. Jake. My mother tried to say something, but he was in a trance now, words pouring out like water from a broken dam. And worst of all, he said, his voice cracking but persisting, is that I found someone. Someone who makes me feel whole. Someone who accepts me exactly as I am. Someone who makes me want to be brave enough to stop lying. He turned completely to face me, tears running freely, but with something like a smile. I'm in love with my best friend, Jake said, and each word felt like an act of rebellion. I love him, and I'm not hiding it anymore. The silence that followed was deafening. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. All eyes at the table alternated between Jake and me, processing, connecting the dots, understanding. His father was frozen, his face a mask of shock. His mouth open, but no sound coming out. It was his mother who spoke first. Jake, she said, her voice thick with tears. Not tears of anger. Something else. Sadness, maybe relief, compassion. Jake, sweetheart, she said, standing slowly. I already knew. Now it was Jake's turn to be shocked. What? I've known for years, she said, and now she was crying too, but with a smile. Mothers always know, honey. I saw how you looked at him. I saw how you changed when you became friends. I saw you happier than I had ever seen you, and I was waiting for you to be ready to tell me. Jake sobbed. Mom, I just wanted you to feel safe, she said, moving around the table to hold him. I wanted you to know that you're my son, always, and I love you, for who you are, not who anyone wants you to be. When she embraced him, everything broke open. Jake fell into her arms, years of hiding and fear finally pouring out of him in sobs that shook his whole body. I saw Mom's tears too. When her eyes met mine, there was recognition. Not exactly surprise. Maybe she'd suspected, in the way mothers do. Jake's sisters had different reactions. The youngest, 16-year-old Emma, was smiling through her tears. I thought I was the only one who noticed, she said softly. But it was when I looked at his father that my heart froze again. He hadn't moved. He was still standing, but now his hands were trembling. His face was red, the veins in his neck prominent. He opened his mouth several times, as if wanting to speak, but no words came out. And then, without saying anything, he turned and left the room. The sound of the door slamming echoed through the house like a gunshot. Jake's mother pulled away from him just enough to look into his eyes. Give him time, she said softly. Your father, he needs to process this in his own way. But he'll come around. He has to, because you're our son, and nothing changes that. But Jake was staring fixedly at the door his father had exited through, and I could see his heart breaking again. All that courage, all that exposure, and still, the rejection he feared most. I stood up then, finally finding my voice. Mr. Anderson, I started to say towards the door, but Jake's mother placed a hand on my arm. Not now, she said gently. Let him go. He needs time. The table dissolved into whispered conversations after that. My mother came over to us, hugged Jake too, said kind things I could barely process. His sisters approached, offering support in their own way. But all I could see was Jake, standing in the middle of the emotional chaos he had created, looking simultaneously relieved and devastated. Later, when we got away, standing in his backyard under indifferent stars, Jake fell apart. I actually did it, he said, his voice raw from crying. I really did it. You were so brave, I said, holding his hands. My dad hates me now. He doesn't hate you. He needs time. Your mom, you saw him. Jake looked up at me, and the hurt in his eyes was almost too much. He looked at me like I was a stranger, like I was something wrong. You're not wrong, I said firmly, squeezing his hands. You're the bravest person I know. You did something most people never find the courage for. You spoke your truth in front of everyone that matters. And I lost my father in the process. You don't know that yet, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. Give it time. Let him process. Jake shook his head, tears streaming quietly. Was it worth it? The question was barely a whisper, and it broke my heart. I pulled him into me, let him cry against my shoulder. Yes, I whispered. Yes, it was. Because now you're free. You don't have to pretend anymore. Whatever happens with your dad, you have your mom. You have Emma. You have the truth. And you have... you? His voice against my neck was so small, so hopeful, it nearly destroyed me. Always, I promised. No matter what. We stayed like that for a long time, just holding each other as the world around us adjusted to the new reality Jake had created. Eventually, we went inside. The house was quiet. Most people had either left or retreated to their rooms. Jake's mother saw us pass and simply nodded, a gesture of understanding and permission. In his room, lying side by side on the bed, Jake finally spoke again. "I'm exhausted," he said. "I feel like I ran a marathon." "You did," I said. "An emotional marathon." He chuckled, a faint but genuine sound. "That was real, wasn't it? I really did that?" "You did. And I said I was in love with you, in front of literally everyone." "You did," I confirmed, feeling my face warm. "Sorry if that was too much," he said, turning to look at me. "I didn't plan it. It just came out." "Don't apologize," I said, meeting his eyes in the dark. "Never apologize for being honest about how you feel. Even when it ruins family dinners and makes fathers storm out?" "Especially then," I said, and we both laughed, a tired but liberating laugh. Jake sighed, his eyes closing. "Tomorrow the whole town will know," he murmured. "News like that travels fast." "I know. My father still hasn't spoken to me. I know. I'm scared of what comes next." "Me too," I admitted. "But at least now we're not facing it alone. We're not hiding. We're not pretending." Jake opened his eyes again, and there was something different in them now. Weariness, yes. Fear, definitely. But also something that looked like peace. "Thank you," he said, "for being here. For not running away when I dumped all this on you." "I would never run away from you," I said, "no matter what." He smiled, that small, fragile smile I was beginning to know so well. "You say that now. Wait until the whole town starts talking." "Let them talk," I said, with more confidence than I actually felt. "We know the truth. That's what matters." Jake took my hand, our fingers lacing together. "That's what matters," he said, almost like a prayer. And there, that night, after the chaos and the courage, after the pain and the relief, we just existed together. Two men who just walked through fire and were still here, still together, still hopeful. But even as Jake finally fell asleep beside me, exhaustion finally winning, I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about his father, thinking about the slamming door, thinking about how, in small towns, secrets don't last long. And I knew, with a certainty that made me tremble, that the real challenge was still to come. Because confessing is just the first step. What comes next, when the dust settles and reality sets in, when the whole town knows and everyone has an opinion, when friends become strangers and family become enemies? That's when you find out what you're really made of. And tomorrow, when the sun rose over our small town, when whispers began to spread from house to house, from church to store, from school to office, we would find out together. But for now, tonight, after all the courage Jake had shown, after all the tears and confessions and hugs, we had this fragile peace, this moment of calm before the storm we knew was coming. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to give us the strength to face what came next. The next morning, the whole town knew. And Jake's father still hadn't said a single word to us. What we didn't expect was who would show up, and who would disappear. The following days were strange, like living in a different version of the same town, the same streets, the same shops, but everything seemed out of place, as if I were seeing through a filter I never realized was there. Some friends just disappeared. No big showdown. They just vanished. Texts went unanswered. Invitations stopped. It was quiet abandonment, and maybe that was the worst part. Not even the honesty of them saying they couldn't stay. Mom struggled. Some days she couldn't look at me. Other days my favorite meal would be waiting with a note. Made this for you. Small things unsaid that meant, I'm here. I'm working on this. My father was a wall of silence. But the world has a strange way of surprising you just when you give up waiting. It was Mr. Morrison, the neighbor who looked like he walked straight out of an old western. Worn Stetson, beat-up boots, hands like weathered leather. He showed up while I was fixing fence at the back of our land, 3 days after everything blew up. Heard it's been rough, he said straight up. No awkward tiptoeing around it like most people did. I didn't know what to say. My younger brother was gay, he continued, still looking out at the horizon. Back in the 70s, you didn't talk about that. He left for San Francisco. Died there alone in '86. He stopped, and his grip on the fence went white. I never told him he belonged here. Never told him he could bring home whoever he wanted. Thought he knew. But he didn't. He looked at me then. So, I'm telling you, you belong here. You and Jake. Always. It wasn't the words. It was the weight of them. The ancient pain he carried, offered as a gift so I wouldn't have to carry the same. Thank you, Mr. Morrison, was all I could manage to say. He nodded and headed back to his truck. Before pulling away, he called through the window. And if your dad gives you problems, you tell him to come see me. I've backed down meaner men than him in my time. I laughed. The first real laugh I'd had in days. Ms. Henderson, my teacher, quietly left LGBTQ+ support group information on my desk. She didn't say anything, just caught my eye, a silent acknowledgement that said she saw me, and the kids. The younger generation didn't flinch. A freshman caught me in the hallway. My cousin's gay, she said. My parents think that means he's going to hell, but I think they're wrong. What you did was brave. 15 years old, and she already understood you get to choose who you become. Maybe the world was changing. Slowly, painfully slowly, but changing. Jake and I became more connected. Not the dramatic movie kind of love. Something quieter and deeper. It was knowing that someone sees you completely and chooses to stay. It was learning. I need silence in the morning, and him knowing he could tell me about his day when the sun went down. It was real. Imperfect. True. We decided to rent a small house on the Morrisons' property. It was old, needed repairs, but it had a porch with a mountain view and enough space to build something of our own. Are you sure? Jake asked on the night we signed the lease. Your family is still complicated. If we do this, if we officially live together, there's no turning back. I held his face in my hands. I've spent my whole life trying to go back, Jake. Trying to undo who I am to fit into what they expected of me. I don't want to go back anymore. I want to move forward, with you. But life, as always, had another surprise in store. 3 weeks after my coming out, I was at the grocery store when my father walked in. We hadn't spoken since that night. Not a word. He slept on the couch, left the house before I woke up, came back after I had gone to sleep. In the grocery aisles, there was nowhere to run. We stood, shopping carts between us like improvised shields. People started to stare. Small town. Everyone knew. Everyone expected the drama. Dad opened his mouth, closed it again, tried once more. I don't understand, he finally said, his voice rough like it hadn't been used in weeks. I don't know if I ever will. I waited. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone in the store could hear it. But you're my son. That's it. Just that. But something inside me that had calcified, steeled for absolute rejection, finally cracked. He didn't hug me, didn't smile, didn't say everything would be okay, but he didn't turn away either. Thanks, Dad, I whispered. He nodded and kept shopping. But when he passed, for just a moment, his hand brushed my shoulder. It was enough. Acceptance didn't come like a dramatic wave. It came like the tide, slowly advancing, sometimes receding, but always returning a little closer to the shore. Mom started asking about Jake with careful questions. Does he eat meat? What size does he wear? Found some good boots. The younger kids didn't have to think about it. Lucas, 12, asked if he could meet your boyfriend. Not some roundabout version of the word, boyfriend, like it was totally normal. Is he fun? Lucas wanted to know. Yeah, he is. Cool, tell him to come play video games with us. And somehow, without any big speech, I was back in the family. Changed. Different. But back in it. Jake and I moved into the house in May. Mr. Morrison helped with the move, along with some other neighbors. Not all. Some faces were missing. Some trucks I expected to see didn't show up. But others did. June brought the town festival. Live bands, food booths, that kind of small-town celebration that feels like coming home. Jake was nervous. We don't have to do this today, he said in the car. We could just stay in. No, I said, taking his hand. No more hiding. We walked through the festival holding hands. Yeah, people stared. Some looked away, some whispered, but others smiled. Mrs. Chen from the market waved at us. Great to see you two. My old baseball coach came over to talk about the season. He didn't mention Jake or anything, but when he greeted us, he held my hand like nothing was wrong. Then I saw them. Near the stage where a band was playing, by the main pavilion, Dad and Mom. They stayed back across the square, just watching. Dad nodded at me once. Quiet. Unmistakable. Mom smiled. Not steady, but real. And that was enough. Jake held my hand tighter. I think we're going to be okay, he whispered. Yeah, I think so too. That night we danced, right there, in front of everyone, and nothing catastrophic happened. The world kept spinning. Life just continued on. But this time, we were visible. Real. Present. 2 weeks later, I was on the porch with coffee, watching the sunrise turn the mountains gold and orange. Jake was still inside sleeping. He's never been an early riser. An engine sound. An old familiar pickup coming up the dirt road. Jake's dad. My chest tightened. He hadn't spoken to Jake since that night. Nothing. Jake pretended it was fine, but I could see it. The way he'd change the subject when family came up. How he'd look away when we drove past their farm. He got out of the truck, more weathered than I remembered. Hunched a little. Morning, he said, his voice gravelly. Morning, sir. He looked at the house, at the fence we'd repaired the previous weekend, at the tools scattered around. Back fence needs reinforcing before winter, he finally said, before the weather gets too rough. It wasn't sorry, wasn't a declaration that he accepted anything, but it was an opening. A way to say, I don't know how to do this, but I want to try. We'd really appreciate that, sir. He nodded. I'll come back Saturday with supplies. As he walked back to the truck, he stopped. He okay? He asked, and I heard something break in his voice for the first time. Jake, is he good? I looked toward the bedroom window, saw the shape of him still sleeping, wrapped in sheets. Yes, sir. He's good. He's happy. The old man nodded, got in the truck, but before he left, I watched him wipe his eyes with the back of his hand. Some fathers say, I love you, with words. Some say it by showing up. Jake came out about 30 minutes later, found me still there. What's with the smile? He asked, wrapping around me from behind. Your dad was here. Jake went rigid. What? He's coming back Saturday, to help fix the back fence. Jake didn't speak for a long time. Then I felt his tears on my neck. He came, Jake whispered. He actually came back. He came back. We stood like that, holding each other, watching the sun fully clear the mountains. Our home, our place, our life. Messy, complex, real. I think about that moment in the shower house a lot. That frozen second when everything shifted. When our eyes locked and neither one of us turned away. That moment was the dividing line of my whole life. Before and after. Before. Afraid. Hiding. Pretending. suffocating under the weight of it every single day. After, living truthfully, seen, known, alive in ways I never thought possible. When Jake didn't turn away that day, he gave me permission to be visible, to be honest, to just be. And everything shifted. Now I look at our life and I see the scars, hard conversations, real losses, pain that sometimes still aches. But underneath all that, I see something new. Peace. Not the kind that comes from avoiding difficult things. The peace that comes from knowing who you are and living it anyway, whatever the cost. Jake and I don't have it all figured out. We still get those looks. We still manage difficult family stuff. We're still in a town that's slowly understanding that love takes many forms. But we have each other, and we're done hiding. We built something here, a real life. We fixed fences. We grew things. We made space for things to flourish. Plants, friendships, hope. And I learned something I didn't expect. Strength isn't about staying hidden. Strength isn't about going through it alone. Strength isn't about never falling. Real strength is choosing to be seen. All of you. No protective layers, no mask. Strength is standing there and saying, "This is who I am," shaking or not. Strength is loving openly when the world might reject it. If you're watching this in secret, in your room with the door locked, with headphones so no one hears, if you're waiting for the perfect time, the right person, enough courage, this is your permission. Not from me. I'm just someone sharing what happened to me. But if my story helps you believe it's possible for you too, then it matters. You don't need to have everything planned. You don't need the perfect circumstances. You don't have to wait for ideal conditions. You just need to take one step toward honesty, toward letting yourself be known. Yes, it will terrify you. Yes, it will be hard. Yes, some people will hurt you in ways that sting. But others will surprise you. They'll accept you. They'll love you not in spite of who you are, but because of it. And you'll find out that being truly seen, completely, is the most powerful thing you can do for yourself. That boy in the shower house, paralyzed between fear and hope, didn't realize he was moments away from his actual life starting. He didn't know one look would change absolutely everything. But he knows now. And so do you. If this story meant something to you, if you saw yourself in it, in the fear, the longing, the struggle, the love, understand that you're not alone. You never were. There are countless people, everywhere, living their own version of this same journey, discovering bravery, discovering love, discovering themselves. And if you want to hear more of these stories, about becoming who you really are, about love appearing in surprising ways, about finding courage when it seems impossible, this channel exists for you. We collect real stories from real people dealing with complicated lives and finding light in the wreckage. Subscribe so you catch the next story. And if you're comfortable, comment below. What was the moment you realized you couldn't keep hiding anymore? What you have to say matters. Your perspective matters. You matter. From where we're standing to wherever you are, I'm grateful you listened. Grateful you're here. Grateful you keep moving forward, even when it's hard. We don't have all the answers, but we have each other. And we're not pretending anymore. Neither do you have to.